Hello, welcome to Maximum Attack. I'm a little bit behind here, aren't I? I keep saying that I'll do these every week, and I'm a couple of weeks out of the loop. If I was going to miss 2 weeks of doing these videos, I think I've probably missed the worst 2 weeks it's possible to miss, because a lot has gone on. There's lots of little snippety bits and pieces stories here. I'm going to try and rattle through these as quickly as possible because I want to get onto a bigger topic rather than just focusing on the one. Co-driver news, there's been lots of that, hasn't there? Lots of that generally this season so far. Today we found out, Thursday, it's today, maybe it was yesterday. This week we have found out that Elliot Edmonton will be parting ways with Gus Greensmith much more amicably than some other co-driver splits. And he will be replaced by Craig Patterson. It appears that Gus and M Sport have decided that a more experienced co-driver may help Gus to develop and to find the pace and consistency that's been lacking since he found himself in a World Rally car. That's a very interesting story. At least the split seemed to be fairly well handled. We have seen these kinds of changes before, and often they work, so hopefully this one will work too, and hopefully Gus will find a bit more pace and a bit more consistency, and perhaps start to silence some of his many critics who perhaps unfairly judge him based on where he's come from and how his rallying is funded, shall we say. I'm not going to talk about more of that anymore because I don't really think it's any of our business how someone funds their rallying personally, but there we are. So that was one co-driver story. Also in the last couple of weeks we've had a much more explosive co-driver story in Daniel Elena's split from Sebastian Loeb. I'm a little bit torn on this one. Elena's comments were not shy by any means, perhaps understandable to some extent given the relationship he and Loeb have had and the success that he and Loeb have had. While I understand his frustrations, I do think it's worth pointing out that Sebastian Loeb is not a man who has to make compromises. If he had demanded, keep doing this, don't I? Got long hair these days. Where's lockdown business? Yes, Sebastian Loeb is not a man who would necessarily have to be forced into making such a decision. I feel that this was probably a joint decision between he and ProDrive. Not a slur against Elena by any means, but perhaps a statement of his intent and desire to try and win the Dakar rally before time makes that an impossibility. Difficult for Elena, difficult for their partnership, whether we see them again outside of Dakar again, who knows. Hopefully we will, because they're a fantastic combination, and any time Elena is in a rally car, I think a lot of us fans enjoy it. So I understand his frustration, but I think his attack on ProDrive was perhaps a little over the top, given that I suspect Loeb was very much involved in those discussions. So that was that. Sticking with big names a little bit, it's come out that Tanak and Neuville will be doing San Remo in World Cars. They've had a special section of the rally set up for them. That's an interesting one. Unsurprising, given that Croatia is the next round, a tarmac rally. Hopefully that'll be good preparation for them, and obviously they're looking to maximise and ensure that they win the Drivers' Championship rather than just helping Hyundai to win the Teams' Championship. One point I would say on this is I really wish that San Remo was back in the World Rally Championship. I think the move to Sardinia for me was a bad one. I don't think Sardinia particularly offers anything to the series personally, and for me Italian rallying is tarmac rallying. And I think that tarmac is still underrepresented in the championship. I understand that lots of people like gravel events, but rallying is a proving ground for road cars. Roads are generally tarmac. Which seems to make sense to me. So there should be lots more. There should be more tarmac in the series. But there we are. Enough of that. The other thing I want to talk about, and I'm going to try and avoid talking about this for too long, is hybrids. A couple of stories. Adamo has come out this week and expressed concern about rapid hybridisation of Rally 2 cars. I understand his questions, I understand his reservations about whether we are adopting a technology that is rapidly becoming out of date. I think we need to look at some other areas, alternative fuels and things, particularly, because I don't think internal combustion is going anywhere just yet in rallying terms, but the more we can do to appear sustainable, the better. But I do understand his reservations. That being said, I think it's probably an easier route to put a mild hybrid kit into a Rally 2 car than where we're going with the Rally 1 cars for next year, where also in the last few weeks we've seen some rather disturbing, depressing stories about delays to the hybrid kits, which were already running late, and also with missing components. Oh, that's not very good, is it? That's not very good. M Sport have run their car now and have done some gravel testing, which is good. Toyota, I suspect, will not be far behind. But for us to be in a position where the kits are not complete while also being late is a real concern, and does raise again the question, should we actually be doing this for next season, or should we push it back a year? I'm not going to talk about this anymore in this video, really, because I am so despondent with the whole approach to this. Well, if you've watched any of the other videos, you know that I rant about it all the time, and I just have to question when Hyundai have still not confirmed that they're going to be in the championship next year with a hybrid car. It's just too much. It just frustrates me, so I'm just going to stop talking about it. Let's move on. Let's not talk about that anymore. Let's talk about the United States of America land, because I think that this is probably the most interesting thing that's happened in the last couple of weeks. Over the weekend we had the 100 Acre Wood Rally, which was won by Subaru. However, the big story wasn't really the car that won the event. You could argue that the car that finished second was a bigger story, and that it was Ken Block's first outing on a rally in a non-Ford for a very long time, as he was in a Skoda R5 Plus, because it had a little bit more horsepower, that he had rented from the man who finished in third place, who was definitely the biggest story of the weekend, Barry Mckenna. So Barry Mckenna showed up with a shiny Fiesta World Rally car that he had bought. This is an interesting one for me. So a couple of weeks ago I wrote a column very regularly for the lovely guys at openpaddock.net. If you haven't seen it, read it. The column this time was about the number of R5 cars that were signed up to 100 Acre Wood, which was a healthy number. There was a lot of R5 cars there, and I thought this was interesting because it shows that US rallying is growing in popularity, which is a really, really, really good thing, because it should hope the global rally scene to become healthier. And it also shows that it's starting to gain enough traction to align itself more and attract the type of cars that we see in Europe and other parts of the world. So that's really good. I think it's interesting the effect that that's having on the series and on American rallying generally, because those cars are obviously very highly developed, very competent. However, they don't necessarily have the best advantage in the US, because US events tend to be fast and quite flowing. So what we see is that on some sections an R5 car is very competitive, but on other sections it struggles against the open class Subaru America cars, which are bigger and just seem to handle those fast flowing roads a bit better. So it's very interesting. Unfortunately, that column has been blown a little bit out of the water by what happened over the weekend. I said actually to Mike Shaw, who runs Open Paddock, how would a world car compare in this environment? And we found out pretty emphatically that a world car would absolutely destroy the lot of them. This isn't a surprise against an R5 car, or even against an R5 Plus car. I think the interesting comparison for me was between the world car and the Subarus, and Mckenna finished in third because he had a puncture and lost best part of 3 minutes. However, after that, he decided to just let the car off the leash and go for it. And even Pastrana, who won the event, said he had nothing to give. He could not match the pace of Mckenna in the Fiesta. And that, for me, raises a bit of an issue. So I should say at this point, I probably should have said a few minutes ago, that Mckenna entered the event under protest. There is some debate about whether the World Car is eligible to compete in the open four-wheel drive class in the ARA because of its aerodynamics. The aerodynamic devices on the car are potentially outside of the regulations of the US. He was allowed to enter the event on the proviso that the authorities will have to decide if the car is eligible. We may not find that out until after the next event, which is a bit confusing. And it leaves Mckenna in the position of not knowing if his car, that he's just spent quite a lot of money on, I should imagine, is actually going to be eligible. And it leaves the championship in a weird position of knowing what the picture's going to look like. Because I think the R5 and Subaru battle was developing into something very interesting, where you had two different car types that had strengths and weaknesses, and you ended up with some really good battles. What you could have if the world car is deemed to be legal is a situation where Mckenna has a car that beats everyone and he wins the championship easily. Good for him, of course, and deserved. He's put up the money, he's a good driver, and would have done the business. I think the problem you're left with is, where does Subaru go? Where does that team go, run by Vermont Sports Cars? Do they have the budget and the capability to make the STI Subaru a car capable of beating a World Rally Car Fiesta? My sense would be perhaps not, because it's a big, heavy car, and it may be difficult to get it on that level, though it does have some advantages in terms of being suited naturally to fast events and having a bigger engine. Where does that leave the guys that I wrote about in my column for Open Paddock in their R5 cars? Because if there's a current World Rally car competing in the US, they're screwed. They either have to spend a lot of money upgrading those R5 cars into truly open category cars, and add aerodynamics, add bigger engines, more power, whatever, to try and be competitive. Where does it leave the organisers? How do they get a handle on this? How do they decide how best to change the situation? Do they enforce regulations on Mckenna and demand that he changes the spec of the car, reduces the power, reduces the aero somehow? Do they open up the rules to allow Subaru to run a bigger turbo restrictor, for example, so they can have more horsepower? What do they do with the R5 cars? There's lots and lots of questions. So for me, having written a column asking how R5 cars would impact the ARA, I think the question we have to be asking ourselves now is, how does a World Rally car impact the ARA? I think the authorities in the US are in a difficult position, because if they ban Mckenna's car, how is he going to react to that after the investment? Does he just sell the car again? Does he try and use the car on WRC events, which is going to cost a fortune? So I would be doubtful of that necessarily. I don't know if the American authorities want to oust one of their, biggest contributors to the health of the championship and the 2020 champion, and potentially 21 champion. Do they risk losing Subaru? Subaru could pull out. If they can't beat that Fiesta, there's no reason for them to be there, and they could leave. So I think the dynamic right now and the questions going forward over the next few weeks as they decide what to do with this car are going to be fascinating. I can't wait to see what they decide, whether there's some shifts in the regulations, perhaps for next year, even if not for this year. I think we find ourselves in a very interesting position. For those of you that don't follow American rallying and are wondering what I'm talking about, I would suggest that you start to pay attention, because for me it's probably one of the most exciting championships, because it has those different dynamics of different car types and different teams that we don't see as much of in Europe. So I definitely follow it. We've got some great drivers. Hopefully we'll see more of Ken Block in the series, whether it's in a Skoda or something else. Hopefully Mckenna will be able to continue to run the Fiesta. Hopefully we'll find a way for the Subarus to remain competitive. Lots of questions, lots of intrigue, so I would heartily recommend you follow all of that. And that's it. I'm going to stop talking. It's nearly 15 minutes, and you've had enough of me. If you've enjoyed this, please like, follow, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, follow me on Instagram. If you're on Instagram, follow me on YouTube. All that rubbish. And I will catch you again next time.